Hi, welcome again to the Air Manager API tutorial video series. We're going to carry on with the explain command and the command subscribe, and hopefully if we get time we're also going to have a look at one of the generic subscribers that you can use with different sims. So let's crack on. So again, I've got the wiki page up, the API page for XPL Command. Very simple. You can see there the command. So it's XPL_command and then literally just the reference to the command ref. So I've showed you the data refs and the commands before. Whoops, it was when I was searching on starter there. So there's a big long list of different commands that you can activate to cause an operation within the X-Plane sim, and in FSX I think these are called events, so you'll see when we get onto that how similar they are. They just use slightly different terminology. So essentially all you do is you list the command ref in speech marks here as per the data ref, similar to what we were doing with the data refs, and that's it, simple as that. So you just issue that command, and what that then does is send that to X-Plane and issues that command within the sim. So it's the equivalent of you allocating one of those commands to a joystick button or a keyboard, and using either a soft button or some Arduino connected hardware button to Air Manager to activate that command. So let's have a quick look at a very quick bit of code that we've got there. So what I've got set up here is XPL command, and I've chosen the standby com frequency fine up. You can ignore the rest of this for a minute. So literally all it's going to do is just run this one command, because this is edited out and this time has got nothing in the loop, so it's not going to do anything. I'll explain what that's for in a minute. So literally just the one command, the XPL command, and so the standby com1 fine frequency. So if we bring the sim up here and Air Manager that I've got open here, you can see I've got the 530 radio up here, and so the frequency that we're particularly interested in is this one here. So every time because that is just a single command, every time, and it's for the fine frequency up, every time I run the instrument, which I'm going to do now, run, you can see that it's toggling that frequency, run again and run again. You can see it's toggling that frequency up just by one little notch at a time. So you're 25 kilohertz. So if we wanted to allocate that button, say an up and a down button, then you could use those two buttons, or to an encoder you could use that to issue that command every time you got one click of the encoder. You could increase the frequency accordingly. So that's one use for it. There is another extra bit of information that you can put on the end of there, over and above that basic command there, and there's this optional field called value on the end. So you put a comma and then you can specify this value. So it says there, providing it with a 1 will send a begin, and providing it with 0 will send an end. So for some of the commands it's useful to be able to hold the button down, say for instance like on a starter for the engine, or I don't know, control wheel steering or something like that. So you may want to send the command begin. So what you essentially do is it's the same command, and I've got an example here. So what we'll do is we'll comment that one out for a minute. Not that it really matters if that runs, but we'll just for the purposes of this code here. In fact, what I shall do is I'll leave that one commented out for a minute. So we'll save this code. And now what I've got here now is I've got the same XPL command. This time I've chosen the heading bug that drives the autopilot. And this time I've added the extra comma 1, and you can see there's a comma 0 on this other command, which will come into play in a minute. So this is sending the begin. Now, because we're only sending the begin, it's just going to begin and it's never going to end. So that's the same as almost like we're pushing a button down, but we're never going to let go of it. So let's see what happens when we do that. Let's go back to the sim here. Let's close the radio off. So we can bring the sim over a little bit more here. And then if we open and run Air Manager, just watch the heading bug there for a moment. So you can see now the heading bug. So what's that's doing, it's beginning that command and it's never ending. So continually the heading bug will down command will be continually issued within the sim, and it will just keep going round and round and round. Now interestingly, what happens when I stop the instrument? I've stopped the instrument's not running, yet the sim's still going, because we haven't issued. So we've essentially told the sim to begin, but we didn't tell it to stop. So the sim is on its own now. The Air Manager's not doing anything. The sim is just continually saying heading down. Okay, now the way to fix that particular issue is to always, when you do a begin, to always follow it with an end. Now what I've got here is, you don't need to worry about the timer code too much, but essentially what this does is this just puts a delay of 3000 milliseconds, so 3 seconds, and then issues this command, so just so that we can see the effect within the sim. So if I unedit that now, and then we rerun this again, what you should see happen, oops, okay, so there you go. So I'll run that again just so you can see it. So watch what happens to the heading bug. So it starts, it runs for about 3 seconds and then it stops. Okay, so what that little bit of code there is doing is, initially it's skipping this command because it's saying after 3 seconds run this function, but it doesn't wait around. It's now going to run this function, and this function says begin, and then after 3 seconds this timer expires and it then calls the contents of this function, and it's only got one line in it which basically says end. So it stops the heading down. So essentially that's the effect that you saw within the sim there of the heading bug moving for 3 seconds and then stopping. So that's all there is to it really for the X-Plane command function. As you can see, you can issue commands. So let's go back up then, and while we've that's quite short, we'll also have a look at X-Plane command subscribe. Now this is a relatively new API function that was implemented. It's one of the ones that I asked for actually, for something that I was working on for an autopilot, and it's a way within X-Plane. We don't have this feature within FSX, but it's unique to X-Plane, and it enables you to subscribe to a command to get the state of a command. So if you assign a button on your joystick or some other hardware, keyboard or whatever, to the sim, it enables Air Manager to see the status of what you're doing with that button. Otherwise it wouldn't know the command. So for instance, you can see here in the code example here on the wiki page, the return value, the type command return value, can be a begin, a once or an end. So that essentially is what it's returning. It's returning back to you the state of the command, whether it's in one of those 3 states. So let's have a quick look at the command itself. So it's XPL _ command, similar to what we just looked at, but it's got the additional _ subscribe on the end. So then you put the command name, same as before, and then a callback function. So similar to a data ref subscribe, but this time we're just but there's no type. So it's just literally just a command, but it's a command subscribe. So the name, we're all familiar with that now, and then the callback function, which is just the name of the function. So again, if we have a look at an example, and I've got an example, not exactly that one, but a one similar to that. So let's, again, for the purposes of this, just comment these out, and then down here I've got an example. So explain command subscribe. I'm going to subscribe to the sim starters engage starter 1 command. So I want to know the status of the starter for engine 1, and I'm going to call control callback when the status of that command changes in any way. So again, this needs to be this function needs to already pre-exist when we're using this function. So hence why the function is before it in the order of the code. And then we're going to define the function as control callback, which is the name that we have here, and we're going to choose a variable name for the piece of data that is returned. So in this case, we're going to call it type command, and we're just going to have just a very simple couple of print statements just to prove the functionality of the thing. But you could put whatever code you wanted in there as part of the callback to do whatever you wanted to do based on the status of the command. So in this particular instance, we're going to print the word start just to confirm that's the command that we're talking about. And then you can see here in the comments it can be begin, once, or end. So that type command will either be of the type begin. That means that someone has began the command, and that's all they've done, whether that be remotely from Air Manager or someone's pushed a button and they've got their finger on it, and while they've got their finger on it, it initially issues that begin, and then it'll continually just keep issuing onces, similar to what you saw with the heading bug. So you'll just get lots and lots of onces until you let go of the button again, and then you'll get an end. So you can look for the begin and the end, and you can act upon that. So this simply just prints command type equals, and then tells us whether it's begin, once, or end in the print statement. So let's see that in action. So what we're going to see now is we're going to see these print values appear in the console as we've seen in previous examples. We press run here. Okay, the gauge is running. Nothing's happening because we haven't pushed any buttons or activated a command yet. So I've got that command mapped to one of the buttons on my joystick here. So as I push that button, I'm going to push it very quickly, and you'll see what happens. So you probably heard that button being activated there, and I pushed it very, very quickly, and you can see what's been returned is we've got start, begin, so you'll get the start every time because that's what the command is, but you can see here it's got a begin. Even for that brief push, it returned a couple of onces, and then it returned an end. So now I'm going to hold the button for a little bit longer, and you'll see what the response we get is. So again, I'm going to push it. So there would have been a begin there, but I'm holding it for a while now, and then I'm going to let go. So I don't know if we've issued too many there now, or whether or not we can scroll down and have a look here. Oh yeah, so there's our original begin, once, and end. If we scroll up a little bit more, you can see there's the beginning of the longer hold, the begin, and then lots and lots of onces while we were holding it, and then at the very end, an end. So just a way of Air Manager being able to monitor the status of a command or a button being held from a joystick or a keyboard. So that is command subscribe. And then the last one I want to talk about in this video is variable subscribe. You'll see that variable subscribe is listed under X-Plane and Flight Simulator and Aerosoft FS2, and I believe yeah, also inter-instrument communication, because you can use it for any of them. So I'm going to just talk about it very briefly. I haven't got any examples for this one because it's very straightforward and similar to what we've seen already with the explain dataref subscribe. So essentially the format of the statement is exactly the same. Rather than called XPL dataref subscribe, we just call it variable subscribe. So it's called the same in all cases, no matter what sim you're using it with. That's the name of the function, and we have the same sort of information. So let's ignore this source for a minute, but we have the variable name, which is the equivalent in xplane of the dataref name that we've already looked at. In FSX, that will be the name of the variable that you're subscribing to. The type, again, that will be your float or your int or your byte type, similar to what we looked at with explain dataref command, dataref subscribe, pardon me, and then the callback function. So again, the function that calls back, and again, you only need this once. If you want to use this multiple times, as in the previous example that I showed in the explain dataref subscribe video, all these dots here on the wiki page just allude to the fact that you can have multiple ones of these variable names and types, as many as you want, and then at the very end you need to have a callback function once. So this additional source argument explains it here in the arguments table here, can be xplane. So essentially it would be just in speech marks the word xplane in capitals here, followed by a comma, and then just the normal the same information that we use in the explain dataref subscribe. It can be FSX if we're using FSX prepared, or AM for Air Manager if we're using the inter-instrument subscribe. So if we want to create a subscribe in an inter-instrument variable within another instrument and we want to subscribe to it, then we would use Air Manager. And the beauty of this is, as you can see in the example here, is you can, if you want to, I tend not to, but you can mix and match explain, FSX and Air Manager subscribes all within the same statement. So there you see the structure of a multi-subscribe, where it's essentially the same. There's your explain one, this is a FSX one, and this is just a unique name that we've created within Air Manager for a variable name. And then we just have the callback function at the very end. So what I tend to do with this statement is I tend to use this one over using the explain dataref subscribe, because if I make instruments that are compatible with, say, explain and FSX and prepared, I can do all the statements for explain, and then I can do a similar list of statements for FSX. So essentially this one here, for instance, I'd go and find altitude in explain, and then I need to find the equivalent altitude within FSX, and I would list that as a separate subscribe, or maybe within the same one. It really depends on the instrument. So that's why I tend to use this one. So even if I'm doing something only for explain, I just got in the habit now of using this one and putting explain in the front, but it does the same thing as explain dataref subscribe. So whoops, gone back a bit too far there. So that's all of the explain set of the subscribes, including the datarefs and the commands there, and we've touched on the variable subscribe there. So perhaps next time we'll look at the Flight Simulator X. So we have a variable subscribe there, which is very similar to the dataref subscribe, a variable write, which is again similar to the dataref write, and an FSX event, which is very similar to explain command. Similar ones in FS2 for subscribe and write, and the inter-instrument is a little bit more involved in so much as you have to create the variable first, because it doesn't already pre-exist as it would do if it was coming from the sim. But once you've done that, subscribe into the variable or the command for that matter is very similar to using it with the existing sims. So we'll touch on them in some of the later videos, but for now that's all I have for this video. Keep watching, and there'll be more to follow. Thanks very much.